further back, we'll catch it off the speakers in that covered area. So.
Okay, sounds good.
Great, I'll do a couple of things here. Let's see if Justin's ready for us. Great, well I want to welcome everybody for coming out. For those of you that I may not have met before, my name's Eric Nordberg. I'm the Dean of the Paul Meek Library. It's good to have folks here today and also people that are joining us on the live stream. This event is going to be recorded as well, so you'll be able to play it back at a later date. Useful information if you haven't been in our building before. Restrooms are down that way on the left. I always like to point that out to folks. There's some refreshments here. Please help yourself. You can get up and down while we're having the event as well. We don't like to leave a lot, so I'll start giving out cookies when we're done to students. So I want to thank you for coming out for this event in the UT Martin Research Series. We designed this activity as a collaboration between the Provost's Office, Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, and the library to highlight research that goes on this campus. A lot of people think of UT Martin as a teaching college, but all of our faculty are required to participate in scholarship of various types, and so it's a great opportunity to talk about the research that's going on here, and research that actually influences then what our students learn in the classroom. A lot of our students are engaged in research, and I know today our speaker is going to talk about the work that he's done at this institution and others that have involved students in actual research projects. I'll give you a heads up, a few more events that are coming up. We're finalizing the additional speakers in this series. The next event in the research series will be on Wednesday, October the 5th at 3:30. Dr. Patrick Baker from the College of Business will be our speaker that day. He's our professor of law and has been doing some interesting work on whether the accreditation of law schools through ABA should be available through FOIA for information on what they're looking at when they accredit law schools. So we'll be talking about that in October. And then we've got a project that we're still finalizing, but Christian Buschardt from the College of Business as well as a marketing professor, and he's looking at doing a tie-in event. If you haven't been over to our special collections area yet, we have an exhibit there, traveling exhibit on the history of Mountain Dew, the soda beverage, and Christian's looking at doing a kind of a repeat of the old Pepsi challenge, but doing it with Mountain Dew and some of its competitors, and then he's working with students on that project, and so we're hoping in November they'll be our research series speaker to talk about that research project and talk about the outcomes of that. Great opportunity for those students to learn about marketing research and how you analyze data and report on it. And then in December we'll have an event that's going to highlight a project. Sam Richardson, who's our special collections librarian, has grant funding from the NEH to survey historical records in West Tennessee. And so he's going to report on that as part of this series. I can also point out that Monday afternoon next week, we're having our library open house, 3 to 5. Please come by the building. It's a lot of fun to see a lot of different things. We're using a theme this year, Colors of the World, and so the participants will be adopting different countries. And so there'll be a lot to learn about the library and about other activities on campus. I do also want to alert you that next Wednesday, the 14th, we're hosting a speaker from the TN Achieves program. This is a program that helps high school students consider their options for getting into college and taking advantage of some of the Tennessee Promise monies that are available to them. And they're looking to recruit mentors for that program. So adults over the age of 21 who will work with high school seniors to kind of talk to them about their options for college. So keep those in mind. And the last one I'd mention is that on Monday, September 19th, as part of Banned Books Week, we're going to have a Banned Books trivia contest. So we're looking for teams to come in and answer trivia questions about books that have been banned around the world. So trying to keep you all busy with events here in the library. So please come out. Keep an eye on our Facebook feed, on our web page, our main page, and we're posting most of our activities now on Runway. And so you'll be able to see those as you go. But to get to the point here, I want to thank Justin, who's helping us with the live stream today, Michael here in the library with technology. I always want to thank Catherine Brown. If you see a fancy little graphic, she works in the library here and does a lot of our graphics work, so we're thankful to her. But mainly I want to help to introduce our speaker today. I think many of you know Dr. Todd Winters. Since 2013, he's been the Dean of the UTM College of Agriculture, Geosciences, and Natural Sciences. And he actually grew up on a farm in Washington State. So many people tend to think of it as a Midwesterner or even from the region, but he's actually out from the Pacific Northwest. Got his undergraduate degree in animal science at Washington State University, then moved to the Midwest where he got his master's degree at Purdue, and then actually went up to Madison, Wisconsin where he got his PhD, which I think is interesting. His PhD is in endocrinology and reproductive physiology. Here as the dean of our ag school, he's been a person who's done a lot of research in animal science, but also in human science. He's going to talk about that a bit today. I spent some time actually at the University of Virginia Medical School, and then had a long portion of his career just north of us here at Southern Illinois University, where he was a professor, also an adjunct professor in the med school there, did some work as an interim dean, which I think helped line him up for this job here. I could go on and on about the things that he's been involved with. He's a very active professional. He still manages to lecture here. He's not one of those deans that sits in his office and tells faculty members what to teach. He actually participates in class instruction here, still in animal genetics, reproduction, things he'll talk about a bit today. He's very interested in the scholarship of teaching and learning at the university level, and so is involved in a lot of different pedagogical issues. He's very excited and interested in international experiences for students. He's taken groups over to Japan, to Italy. I think he'd actually like just to go to Italy and stay there if he could. He's taken a group next summer over to Kenya on a research trip, which if you get a chance to talk to him afterwards, they're going to do a lot in 2 weeks when they're in Africa. It sounds like a really wonderful piece. He is a fellow of the Food Systems Leadership Institute. He's been involved with the Non-Land Grant Agricultural and Renewable Resources Universities group. I think it's quite interesting that he's involved locally with the Northwest Tennessee Local Food Network and really connecting in between farmers and eaters. And I'm an eater, so I appreciate people that connect farmers to eaters. I think more interesting, though, to you, you should know that he's been involved with the North American Colleges and Teachers of Agriculture, which is the professional association within universities that teach ag. And he actually took office and is currently the president of that organization, which is an international organization covering colleges of ag. For me, though, I thought the thing that really caught my eye this year is that he was honored at his alma mater, Purdue University, as their lifetime achievement at the ag school there. One of only 2 in the last couple of years to be given that honor. So I hope you will help me join me in helping to welcome Dr. Todd Winters.
Well, thank you, Eric, and it's great to be here. It's always wonderful to promote agriculture. That's what I'm going to be doing today. If I didn't do that, you wouldn't want me to be the dean of the College of Ag and Applied Sciences. So it's good to be here. It's good. Those of you that are streaming in, welcome as well. This is a great place to give a talk, because if you get bored with me, you can just look out the beautiful quad out there. But I'm going to talk to you today about. We know this week is Soybean Festival week, and Mr. Parks Wells, the executive director emeritus, as of July 1st, is here, and I gave him permission to butt in if he wants to add anything to what I'm saying. But I'm going to talk a little bit about this magic bean, and it is Larry over here and our former dean Jim Byford actually wrote a song about the magic bean, and actually at the mayor's. They play that every year at the mayor's luncheon that we had on Tuesday. So we thought about maybe having him do that today, but it was just too much. As you can see, I'm already pretty wired up here, and I would just added more wires to everything. So, but Larry, it's good for you to be here. So, without any further ado, I think I'll go ahead and get started. My talk's in kind of 2 parts. I'm going to first, maybe third of the talk, I'm going to actually talk about just kind of a general overview of how soybeans are utilized here in the United States and even globally. And then I'll talk about some of my research, which was really kind of a walk down memory lane because, as you know, I spend most of my time being an administrator these days. And so, what I'm going to talk about is about 20 years of research that I did at Southern Illinois University before I went to the dark side and became an administrator. So we'll go ahead and get started. So, importance to soy to West Tennessee. A lot of you already know this, but I do want to point it out that it is the most valuable crop in Tennessee, if you look at dollars that are generated. And annual production, I think this is 2020 data, was almost $1 billion. It's getting close to $1 billion, $965 million. There's about 81 million bushels of soybean that are produced in Tennessee. Tennessee ranks 16th in the U.S., and you might say that's not very high, but we still produce a lot of soybeans. Illinois is number one, which will tie very much into my research presentation because I did most of my research up in Illinois. U.S. produces about 4.2 billion bushels. And you can kind of see the counties here in 2020. Dyer, Gibson, Obion, Haywood, Weakley County are the top producers here in West Tennessee. So it is very important to our region, and there is a reason that we call this week the Tennessee Soybean Festival. Soybeans are also a big export. Last year, I think we broke $25 billion in exports in soybeans. Actually, I think it was over that, 27 something. I think it's 27.2, I think is what it was. And as you can see, most of that goes to China, over half of it. And so you can also see this little dip here. Does anybody know what that little dip is? 2018. Remember what happened in 2018? It was actually before COVID. That was the trade war that we had with China. And so you can see that was a big dip. That hurt us a lot. There was a lot of soybean farmers that Parks was sweating a little bit during that time as well. But as you can see, it's come back up and it's even higher than it was before. And so, and you can see some of the other places where soybeans are sold, exported here from the United States. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Parks?
No, it's just, we're so dependent on China. We just don't know what's going to happen there.
Yeah.
So we're kind of on the edge all the time.
Yeah, it is. It's.
But how dependent are they on us for this?
Sure.
Yeah.
But they also, they are importing more from South America than they are from us.
Yeah.
So they get through, that growth down there has been phenomenal.
Yeah. So those of you that can't hear Mr. Wells is that we are very dependent on China, and you can kind of see that from the graph. So let's talk a little bit about soybean utilization. And I think this is a graph that I know some of you in the room have seen. About 80% of a soybean goes into soybean meal, and about 20% goes into oil, okay? And of that 80%, 97% of the soybean goes towards animal feed, okay? A lot of people don't realize that. Farmers realize that, but I think the public does not realize that. 97% of the bean itself, yeah, just the bean itself, it goes into animal feed, and then about 3% actually goes into the food products that I think a lot of the people in the crowd think about, okay? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. The oil portion, about 68% is in food. Soybean oil, which most of you know as vegetable oil. It's the major component for vegetable oil. Makes up 68% of that. 25% in biodiesel and bioheat. And I'm going to also talk to you a little bit about some new technologies that are coming out as far as biofuel. And then 7% for all kinds of industrial uses. And if you've been watching the Soybean Festival Facebook page, they've been every so often been putting things like crayons and car parts. There's just all kinds of things. AstroTurf that you can make out of soybeans. So let's talk a little bit about each one of those components. So animal feed, as you saw, was one of the big areas. And it's an excellent protein source for animal feeds. And I know when Parks is out talking about soybeans, he's always talking about the animals because he'll buy steaks for dinners and stuff that we have for the farm groups, and it's all because the soybeans are going through the animal to produce that meat, and or milk or eggs or any of those products. So it's a very common source of protein in poultry, swine, dairy, finishing beef, aquaculture, and it's even found in a lot of pet foods. And so you'll see soybean everywhere. It's kind of interesting. Aquaculture, we don't do a lot of aquaculture here, but when I'm not talking about it later in my talk, so I'll talk about it now. It's a great grower for fish, but one thing that it does is you still have to come in at the very end, finishing with some fish protein to get those omega-3 fatty acids up. The bean does need to be cooked and the oil extruded. We call that crushing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the biofuels and the crushing. You don't want to eat raw beans. Don't go out to the soybean fields out here and start eating raw beans. You're going to get a bad tummy ache. And if you can get high enough, it can be very toxic. So even edamame, which a lot of people think are raw beans, they're not. They're cooked. And so you need to remember that. I've heard of people doing that, so don't do that. Soybean oil can also be used as an energy source in animal feeds as well. So that's very, very important. So let's talk a little bit more about human food products, which I think more of you are probably interested in. Soybean oil is the most utilized by humans. It's the primary component of vegetable oil. It can be and is often blended with other oils, corn oil, sunflower oil. There's a number of those different types of oils, but it's generally mostly soybean oil. It's used for cooking and baking. Probably every one of us has some vegetable oil in our cabinet right now, and so it's hard to live without it. It's in salad dressings, mayonnaise, margarine, all made from soybeans. Okay. Soy is also an alternate source of protein. It's actually a very good protein source. A lot of you have heard of tofu. Tofu, I remember back when I was in high school in the 70s, they said that's a hippie food, So, people weren't really eating tofu, but tofu is actually pretty common in a lot of diets now, and so I eat tofu when I go out, especially when I have Asian food. Tofu is very good source of protein. Soy milk. Notice I have the milk in quotes there because as a dairy farmer's son, I'm not too keen on using the word milk in that. But I wish they would have came up with something else, juice. Although then the orange guys would be upset about it. You had one. What do you call it? I heard you one time. What should they call it? Soy milk?
Oh, we just call it soy beverage.
Soy beverage. Yeah, that's a better one.
The group of soybean farmers
Yeah.
voted that we don't call it milk.
Yeah. Because milk, that means something, and it's that's, and so although I don't think we're going to win that battle, it's going to be hard to win that battle, but who knows? Textured soy protein is in a lot of different foods. Soy nuts you can eat, whole soybeans. We already mentioned edamame, and then one that's another controversial one is the soy-based meats. Okay, and I've got a picture of this right here. Does anybody know what this is? Bean burger? No. Sorta, soy burger. It's a specific kind of soy burger, though. And it's found, one of the few places you can find it is here in Tennessee. Anybody hear of a slug burger? Slug burger. Some of you guys, you've been here a while. You've never heard of a slug burger? Yeah, Mississippi, northern Mississippi, they do slug burgers. Slug burger is a soy-based meat protein patty. They actually use the extender. You know, we've been using soy as extenders in sausage and meats for a long time, and so it's made mostly of that extender. And you fry it up, and you know, Selmer. There's some really good places down in Selmer that you can get those slug burgers, and they actually taste pretty good. You know, they have mayonnaise and pickles and everything on them, and you know, it's an egg product. So, you know, especially a lot of the beef industry is not too happy about some of the plant-based meats and stuff. But it, you know, the way I look at it, you know, there is a fine line, but it is an agricultural product, and so we still need to support it. But when it starts pushing other agricultural products out of the market, we got to be a little bit careful. So we'll keep an eye on that. The one that you hardly at all can get away from is this one, soy lecithin. It's in everything, seems like. It's found in many foods, cereals, pastas, breads, soy milk, alternatives, meats. I've got them all named there. And what it is, it's an emulsifier. It's or a lubricant when added to the food. So it's what keeps things from clumping together in these boxes that you buy at the store, and it's in everything. And so it's also used as an antioxidant, flavor protector. And so it's really hard to find a food out there that does not have soy in it. And a lot of times it's because of this compound here. So it's soy's in everything. It's you know, read your labels and you'll see. Chances are you're going to see, especially if it's some type of food that's been processed a little bit, it's going to have a little bit of soy in it. There's also some fermented soy foods, soy sauces. A lot of sauces have soy in them. You know, Allegro is over here. In Paris, almost all their products are soy-based. It's a fermented. Not a lot of nutrient value to these guys, but they do make things taste better, which is a good thing. Miso, a lot of you, I like miso soup. Miso is a fermented soy paste. And it's used to make that miso soup. So just another example of a soy human food product. Okay, let's talk about some non-food things. And about 7% of the soybean goes into these non-food feed uses for the soybeans. And the big one, or one of the big ones, and it's one that I think you'll even start hearing more about, are the biofuels. And a lot of you have heard about biodiesel. It's been around for a while. It's blended with petroleum diesel. It has to be blended in most cases, and so it causes some problems. You get a little bit too high of the soy level, soy biodiesel in there. You're might glum up your motor a little bit, so you got to make sure you have it blended just right. Bioheat's another one. This is biodiesel that's blended with other heating oils. It's used in the Northeast, especially. It's used a lot. Renewable diesel and airplane fuel are the two big new ones, and we've been hearing a lot about those. They're kind of the next generation biodiesel, and they figured out the organic chemistry, the chemistry of these things, to make it that it's pretty much like regular diesel. Okay, you'll be able to use it just like regular diesel, and obviously that's going to really increase, hopefully, the demand for soybeans. And then I heard this morning, I actually put this on my slide this morning, they're working on some airplane fuels made out of soybeans too. So I don't think planes will run too well on diesel, so it'll have to be even more refined yet than that. Any questions? You have anything to add to that, Parks?
On the airplane fuel, that's called sustainable aviation fuel.
Okay.
And that is a really big growth in soybeans. In years, we've tried to work with the marine industry, the ships, railroad industry. They always set us away, and we never thought we'd get into aviation fuel. But now, marine and rail have come to us, and this is for cleaner air.
Yeah.
And then the sustainable aviation fuel is just taking off, and the big
and hopefully that'll really increase the demand for soybeans. Yes, do you have a question?
Nice question, but it would make sense that the airplane industry would want to try to be more healthier, at least in terms of air pollution.
Yeah.
They're kind of, well, constantly demonized for their horrendous amounts of pollution, for little gain.
Yeah, all industries are in that case right now. So, but you're exactly right.
The airplanes more so than others.
Yeah. So, and I don't think we're going to give up flying. Some other uses, I just have a list here. A lot of paints have soy in it, plastics. This is actually Purdue University. They actually have an astroturf that's made out of soy. My alma mater. Cleaners, candles. See soy candles all the time in a lot of shops. Motor oil, synthetic motor oils, other lubricants. Sealants, tires. Goodyear has a soy product tire. Stretcher has a soy product, or Sketcher has a soy product shoe, running shoe. Crayons, a lot of inks. Most newspaper inks are a soy-based product as well. So these are just some of the different utilizations of the soybean. So that's the utilization. Now I'm going to get into the research side of it. And as I said, this has been kind of a walk down memory lane. It's been, I really haven't done any, I'll just admit it, I haven't really done much soybean research for at least 10 years. And it's been probably, it was kind of slowing down 15 years ago. So, we did a lot of good work, and I'm very happy to share that with you. So I'm going to start out, and this is probably not going to make sense to a lot of you, but some of you it will make some sense to. The reason I got into soybean research is because of estrogen, okay? And I think most of you know what estrogen is. It's the female sex hormone. It's really the hormone that makes females female. It's in a nutshell. And I've been actually studying estrogens for about 40 years. Back in 1982 at Washington State University, I did an undergraduate research project where we used estrogens along with the other sex steroid, progesterone, to artificially induce lactation in sheep. Okay, and that was my undergraduate research project. I then went to Purdue. Actually, this is me playing the guitar to my cows, my research cows, where I studied the mechanisms of the formation of cystic ovaries in cattle, which again was overproduction of these sex steroid hormones, estrogen and progesterone. I also looked at the role of estrogen and other hormones on estrus behavior, which is the sexual behavior in cattle. Then went on to Wisconsin, looked at the interactions of estrogen and growth factors on embryonic development of the reproductive system. Also did some work with estrogen and cancer development. Then went on to the University of Virginia, where I was an NIH fellow there, looked at the effects of growth factors on ovarian function, including estrogen synthesis, using a swine model. And then when I was at Southern Illinois University for about 20 years, I looked at the effects of what they call selective estrogen receptor modulators in mammalian physiology. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. So this is kind of my journey through the soybean fields. As was mentioned earlier, I'm from the state of Washington. How many soybeans parks do they grow in the state of Washington? None. Yes, that's the answer. I'd never seen a soybean until I moved to the Midwest. And so, so I got a little bit of it at Purdue and Wisconsin and Virginia, but I actually started doing soybean research in 1994. And I was hired as an assistant professor in animal physiology and biotechnology at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. And I shared a lab with a plant biotechnologist whose name is David Lightfoot. And David's no longer with us. He passed away a couple years ago. And we discussed these estrogenic compounds that you find in soybeans. They're called isoflavones. I'll show you that here in a minute. And he also indicated that the Illinois Soybean Promotion Board had a lot of money that they would spend on research. So when you're an assistant professor, you're always looking for money, and that was one of the reasons. And they're number one. It's between them and Iowa, always going back for number one as far as soybean production in the country. So David kind of got me started. And then a year later, Dr. Bill Bands joined us at SIU, and he was a new professor in food nutrition, dietetics, and he was a diabetes researcher. And so David and I kind of got him interested in soy foods and told him, again, that the Illinois Soybean Association had a lot of money, and so it'd be good to do some research on soy utilization. So that's how we got started, and for almost 20 years, we studied bioactive factors in soybeans, and mostly on human and animal health. We brought in about $6 million in grants and contracts. We had 2 patents, over 50 publications and presentations in the areas of reproduction, growth and development, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, obesity, liver disease. And with David, we also actually bred some soybeans for content of some of these bioactive factors. So it was quite a run, actually. So just a little bit about the soybean bioactive factors. There's a number of bioactive phytochemicals that you find in soybeans. And I've got these listed here. We've already talked about lecithin, but the 2 that I'm going to talk about the most are isoflavones and a little bit the phytosterols, okay? Because these are the compounds that are most closely related to estrogen, and that's how I'm coming around to estrogen. Research has implicated that these phytochemicals function in cholesterol reduction, cardiovascular disease prevention, diabetic symptom prevention, bone loss prevention, and cancer prevention. So there's a number of things that the research implicated. And so just a little bit about these compounds. Isoflavones, genistein, which you see here, is the primary isoflavone that you find in this protein meal fraction. So it is in the protein fraction. And it's thought that it's in the soybean. It's got to be there for a reason. It's actually the chemical that attracts the microbes, the nitrogen-fixing microbes, to the plant in the soil, the rhizobia. So it does have a use. But they are also what we call phytoestrogens. And the reason we call them phytoestrogens is that they bind to the estrogen receptor. All hormones act in kind of a lock and key type of mechanisms. Okay? So without one or the other, that action isn't going to work, and that's true for estrogens. And so it's either a weak estrogen, in some cases an anti-estrogen, which means that it binds to that receptor and it won't let go, so estrogen can't get in there. Okay? That's essentially what that means. And a lot of breast cancer drugs are anti-estrogens. Tamoxifen is the most common one. The other thing is that they act as a selective estrogen receptor modulator. And I kind of tell you that. Sometimes they're an estrogen, sometimes they're an anti-estrogen. Sometimes they'll affect one tissue, but not another tissue. So it's very, very interesting. And I've got a star there because our group were some of the pioneers in actually discovering that. The other thing that they do is they bind to what they call peroxisome proliferation activator receptor agonists. I know that's a mouthful, but it was a new mechanism that no one had ever seen before. We were the first to do it, to show that, with some collaborators at Notre Dame University. And we saw positive effects on both glucose and lipid metabolism that deal right into diabetes, as we had started working on. They're also at what they call a tyrosine kinase topoisomerase inhibitor, which is an anti-cancer type activity. And so they have all these effects that can affect human and animal health. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that here in a little bit. The soy phytosterols are another kind of estrogenic type of compound. You can see the structure here. Here's estrogen. You can see the relationship. They have a very similar structure. And so they actually have been used to treat prostate cancer. A lot of these prostate drugs that you find in the vitamin section of the store, Walmart, have this beta cytosterol in it. It also lowers cholesterol. So that's another one that we studied a lot, but most of our time was on these isoflavones. So back to my origins and reproduction, kind of the first things that we looked at were effects of these compounds on reproduction. And the uterus is really a major target of estrogens in all female mammals. And so we looked at uterine health reproductive tract symptoms. And we found that soy protein, soy phytoestrogen have estrogenic effects on the female reproductive system. That wasn't surprising. That was already known. But we actually got down and did some histology and found that it plays around with connective tissue content in the uterus. And it may decrease then the formation of fibroids, which is a big common problem in a lot of women, and also alleviate a lot of postmenopausal symptoms. So that was one area. And it wasn't a major focus of what we were doing, but we, as you can see, we looked at that for some time. The other area that we looked at is ovarian function. We found that these isoflavones and soy protein can decrease mechanisms to cause ovulation or ovarian follicles to die, and thus increase ovulation rate. So what I mean here is every time a mammal has either an estrus or menstrual cycle, there are a number of follicles that are recruited. And then there's a few of those that are selected. And they're usually, if you're a human female or even a cow, one is dominant and becomes that follicle that ovulates. Okay? Well, what we found is that these compounds can actually increase the number of follicles that get to that dominant stage by decreasing a physiological mechanism that they call apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. Okay? And so we did studies on a number of different species, including pigs. And in the pig study, we actually found that those pigs that were on that high soy diet actually had about one piglet on average more than the rest of the animals. Now, the problem with pigs is, as Parks can tell you, pigs are already on a high soy diet, so it's not going to make a big difference with pigs. But it could make some differences with some other mammals, including humans. We also looked at estrogen action. I've talked a little bit about this. We proved that these compounds are selective estrogen receptor modulators. They can repress genes. They can stimulate genes depending on the tissues. I already talked to you about this PPAR receptor. This is some of the data from the study. This Mizai 2003 article was the article that I've been an author on that's been the most quoted. And it's like 10 times more than any of the other papers that I wrote. It was really, a lot of people looked at that article, and it gave us a lot of notoriety. Did a little bit on cancer. Again, it wasn't an emphasis of what we were doing. But we did do a little bit on breast cancer and found that a soy diet does have some protective effects against breast cancer and mammary tumor development. Notice that I say development. And all these things that I'm talking about, you do need to talk to a healthcare profession if you're going to go on a high diet, because sometimes those tumors change and it could actually be detrimental after they've developed. So you need to be a little bit careful. And the same thing's true of prostate cancer. We found in combination with vitamin E, it does alleviate or decrease the growth of prostate cancer. And we also found that it decreased the prostate. Yes?
What is that a picture
Oh,
of?
that's a good question. I forgot to say. This is actually an athymic immunosuppressed nude mouse. And it's actually the animal model that we use to study cancer. We actually put some cancer cells under their skin, and they actually grow tumors. And we can then feed them this diet, and we can see how it affects the tumor size. So they're kind of ugly, but they're kind of cute at the same time. So, oh, they're just little. They're maybe about that big. They're really, really little. I don't know. I've never done that. We've done all these other things, but the area that we spent the most time on, and the area that we had the most publications in, is this our studies on metabolic syndrome. How many have heard of metabolic syndrome? A few of you, okay. It's also sometimes called syndrome X. And it's a cluster of conditions that increase your risk of heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. And so some of the conditions include increased blood pressure, high blood sugar, excess body fat around the waist. This is what this picture shows. If you're male and shaped like an apple, and if you're female and shaped like a pear, you have a high propensity of possibly getting metabolic syndrome. Okay, and then also there's abnormal cholesterol and triglyceride levels, and so it causes a number of different problems. So we studied this a lot, and there was a lot of interest, and that's still a lot of interest in this. And again, I want to say, what we did is not the new diet pill. Still, diet and exercise are the two best ways to fight metabolic syndrome, but these are some ways to alleviate some of the symptoms. So the first one was diabetes. We found that soy protein and soy phytoestrogens have a positive effect on insulin resistance. That's what this graph shows. This is the same type of glucose tolerance test. A few of the women in here have probably been pregnant, and they do a glucose tolerance test, or if your doctor thinks you might have some diabetes, they'll do this glucose tolerance test. Same thing, and we saw that the high soy diet, the animals on the high soy diet actually had better glucose tolerance than the rest. They improve lipid metabolism, produce anti-diabetic effects, activate those PPAR receptors. I'll show you some of that data here in a minute. They also improve plasma, lipid profiles, fasting glucose. Essentially, everything that you can think of that has to do with diabetes, it has a protective effect against. Okay, almost everything that we looked at. A big one was fatty liver. This was one that surprised us. We didn't expect this. We weren't really looking at fatty liver. We were looking at diabetes, but when we dissected these animals, we found that these animals had better looking livers than the ones that were on the control. And so they are beneficial against the treatment of fatty liver disease. Cardiovascular disease, a lot of cardioprotective effects, antioxidant systems, and they actually minimize the undesirable effects elicited by estrogens. Some of the women might know that there's a problem with, especially birth control pills, is where you see this, is that birth control pills can cause some cardiovascular problems, especially blood clots, if you get too high of a level especially. So we found that's protective against that. Platelet reactivity, which is involved with plaque formation. We saw some improvements there. Notice I have Carroll et al. 2001. I don't think he's here, but Brian Carroll is now he was my grad student back then, and he's now he's now a faculty member here at UT Martin in nutrition and dietetics. So soy isoflavone in the diet also modulate smooth muscle growth and development. Again, that has to do with some of the plaque development, affects that as well. So we saw a number of effects there. And again, this is some of that data. Pretty much has an improvement in every place. There was one place where we didn't see an improvement, and we still don't know why that is. Plasma triglycerides did not go down, even though they did go down in the liver. Okay, so I'm not sure what the reason for that is, but it was protective against most things. And again, this is another one of our animal models. This is what they call a Zucker obese mouse, and this is a very commonly used rat model for obesity. And we also use pigs a lot for a model as well. And all this work together led to a patent. When we actually, in 2003, we actually were issued a patent, and a couple years later, also an Australian patent, and it's actually licensed to Archer Daniel Midland Company, which is a big producer of soybean products, and they have the patent. Now, most of you know that in the patent area, Saman knows this, I know, patents only last for 20 years, so we're just about out here with the patent. But but you can read the patent. It was used to treat medical conditions, hepatic steatosis, which is fatty liver disease, or hepatitis, hepatitis I should say, insulin resistance, glucose tolerance, syndrome X, which is metabolic syndrome as a whole, abnormal platelet function, and abnormal vascular reactivity. So we're pretty proud of that. The last thing that we did, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but is we did start to do some research, and they're still doing some of this research at SIU, is to breed soybeans for isoflavone content. And some of the, I don't see any geneticists in the room here, but you know, we developed some QTL maps and identified the sites on the chromosome, and so we have actually started, or they have started breeding soybeans for isoflavone content. Now the problem with this, a lot of the big companies are doing the same thing, and it's pretty hard for the university to compete with a Corteva or any of those big companies that are doing this. So, but it's still something that we did and continue to try to develop varieties of soybean that do have higher contents of these isoflavones. So that really concludes what I have to say today. Have a lot of people to thank here. You can't do research without funding. Illinois Soybean Promotion Board, all these guys here helped a lot. Again, about $6 million worth of research funded by those agencies. I would be amiss not to mention the Tennessee Soybean Promotion Board that helps our programs here at UT Martin. I heard this morning that over $14 million has been given to between us and UT Knoxville to do soybean-related research. Is it 0.5% of every bushel that a farmer gets? They put into what they call the checkoff that actually pays for this research. Tennessee Corn Promotion Board is very similar type of thing. They're kind of partners. They do a lot of things together. Probably will even do more things together. A lot of faculty, postdoctoral scientists, graduate students, a lot of undergraduate students, okay? My grad students, one of my grad students put a plaque on the grad student office wall. You know, graduate school is not, how did that go? Oh, it's not a job, it's an indenture. So we worked them hard, but they did very well. A lot of these people are in higher education, either researchers, faculty, teachers, even a few farmers, which is probably the most important one. You know, we wouldn't do any of this without farming. So a lot of veterinarians, even some medical doctors in this list as well. So that concludes my presentation. Do we have any questions? I got done, I think, within an hour. Any questions or comments? Yes?
Well, as I
Hear it.
indicated before, so that's just bean.
That's just the bean.
There's another whole area of research on the plant itself.
Well, the plant, yeah, there are things that we do with the plant. The plant really isn't, the best thing right now for the plant to do is to go back into the soil, and that's really what they do. Now, originally, from what I hear, back before the 20th century, they did use soybeans as a hay source. It was really, they made hay out of it, just like alfalfa hay. It's a legume, very good hay source, and they did that. But they found that this bean has a lot more value, and so that's what they look at.
Would you go back to a picture that shows the bean?
Okay, sure.
And Todd, make sure you repeat the questions that you get.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay, and where it says 80%, there is a phylum in there, an island, and this is connection of the bean inside the pod. And the leaves on the plant are the warehouse, the energy. And it transfers down through that umbilical cord into the soybean. So we use, and that soybean has a hole around it. We separate that out, we use a hole for different things, but it's all kind of different things. But the
Craig Derrick, who's on our faculty, he's doing some things with hulls as a litter for in poultry houses. So it's kind of got some absorptive type of properties. So he's been doing some research in that. But as far as the rest of the plant, it pretty much comes out the back of the combine, and it goes back into the soil. So, any other questions or comments, concerns? Again, I talked a lot about a lot of health benefits potential. Again, talk to your doctor or your nurse practitioner before you try some of these things, because it might be just kind of like the old going in and eat those raw soybeans. You might get a little sick. So
One more question here in the front.
I was just going to ask, do you know anything further about the nitrogen-fixing bacteria or anything that matter?
yeah, the only thing I know, that's a very important part of the plant. That's legumes have that ability to do that, and they put nutrients back into the soil. And that's one reason that George Washington Carver came up with rotations of soybean and corn plants. He's actually the guy who came up with that, and so that's why we usually rotate, because now we still have to add some other nutrients to the soil, but it does fix the nitrogen from using those bacteria.
Great. Well, I know that Dr. Winters is going to be here for a few minutes if you have additional questions or conversation, but I hope you'll be back for our future events, and again, maybe help me in thanking Dr. Winters for sharing his research.
Thanks.
Thank you.